They called me scholarship trash and said I'd never amount to anything. 5 years later, I walked into my high school reunion as the youngest partner at Peterson and Associates. When my former best friend Jessica asked, "Do you remember me?" I smiled and said, "How could I forget?" The invitation to Riverside High's 5-year reunion arrived at my Manhattan office on a Tuesday morning. Premium cardstock, embossed lettering, the works. As I held it between my fingers, memories flooded back like a dam bursting. Memories I'd spent years trying to bury. My name is Emma Chen, and this is the story of how I went from being the poor scholarship kid everyone looked down on to becoming someone they'd never see coming. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, I was raised by my grandmother after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. Grandma Lee worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat in our tiny 1-bedroom apartment. When I earned a full scholarship to Riverside Academy, the most prestigious private school in the city, we thought it was our ticket to a better life. I was wrong about that. From day one, I was marked as different. While my classmates arrived in luxury cars driven by private chauffeurs, I took 2 buses and walked the final mile. Their backpacks cost more than our monthly grocery budget. Their casual Friday outfits were worth more than my entire wardrobe. But the worst part wasn't the material differences. It was the deliberate exclusion, the calculated cruelty disguised as innocent teenage behavior. Jessica Morrison was the undisputed queen of our class. Beautiful, wealthy, charming, and absolutely ruthless when it came to maintaining her social hierarchy. Her father owned half the commercial real estate in Portland, and her mother was a former Miss Oregon who'd married well. For the first semester, Jessica actually seemed friendly toward me. She'd invite me to sit with her group at lunch, include me in conversations, even invite me to a few parties. I thought I'd found a real friend, someone who saw past the economic differences. I couldn't have been more naive. The trap was sprung during our junior year winter formal. I'd saved for months to buy a dress from a discount store, something simple but elegant that I thought made me look sophisticated. I was excited to finally attend a major school event, to feel like I belonged. When I arrived at the hotel ballroom, I immediately noticed something was wrong. Other girls were pointing at me and whispering. Some were barely containing their laughter. It wasn't until I saw Jessica that I understood. She was wearing the exact same dress as me. Not similar, identical. Same color, same cut, same cheap polyester fabric. But where I looked awkward and out of place, Jessica had somehow made it work. She'd accessorized it with expensive jewelry, professional makeup, and an air of confidence that transformed the discount dress into something that looked intentionally ironic. "Oh my God, Emma!" she exclaimed loudly, making sure everyone in earshot could hear. "We're practically twins. I got this dress as a joke. My mom said it would be hilarious to wear something from a thrift store for once. But you look so serious in it." The laughter that followed was crushing. I realized in that moment that Jessica had somehow discovered where I'd bought my dress and had deliberately purchased the same one to humiliate me. She'd turned my attempt to fit in into a public spectacle of my poverty. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came during her speech when she was crowned Winter Formal Queen. "I just want to thank everyone for this honor," she said into the microphone, her voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "Riverside Academy has taught me so much about appreciating what we have and understanding that not everyone is as fortunate. Some people have to work so much harder just to be here, and I think that's really inspiring." Her eyes found mine in the crowd. Like my friend Emma, she's shown us all that it doesn't matter if you're scholarship trash. Sorry, scholarship student. You can still try to belong, even if you'll never really fit in. The slip was deliberate. The correction was performed. The damage was irreversible. I left the dance that night in tears, taking the bus home alone while my classmates continued celebrating. The video of Jessica's speech and my humiliated reaction was all over social media by morning. The hashtag scholarship trash started trending among Riverside students. The bullying intensified after that. Students would leave fake donation boxes on my desk with signs reading, "Help Emma afford real clothes." Teachers, who should have intervened, seemed to find the situation more amusing than concerning. The administration, dependent on donations from families like the Morrisons, turned a blind eye. My grades, which had always been excellent, began to slip as I struggled with depression and anxiety. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Patterson, called me in for a meeting near the end of junior year. "Emma," she said with fake concern, "I'm worried about your college prospects. Your recent performance has been disappointing. Maybe you should consider more realistic options. Community college could be a good fit." I knew what she was really saying. Students like me didn't belong at elite universities. We should be grateful for whatever scraps were thrown our way. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let them win. I spent the summer working every available hour, saving money for SAT prep courses and college application fees. I studied until my eyes burned, determined to prove that intelligence couldn't be bought. When senior year began, I was ready. But Jessica wasn't done with me yet. Our AP English teacher, Mr. Davidson, announced that the class would be competing for the Morrison Academic Excellence Award, a $50,000 college scholarship funded by Jessica's family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I threw myself into the required essay with everything I had. The topic was overcoming adversity, and I had plenty of material to work with. I wrote about loss, about poverty, about the strength my grandmother had shown while raising me alone. I wrote about dignity in the face of cruelty and the power of education to transform lives. When Mr. Davidson handed back our graded essays 3 weeks later, his expression was troubled. "Emma," he said after class, "I need to speak with you." My heart sank. Had I somehow failed? "Your essay," he continued, "is extraordinary. It's the best piece of writing I've seen in 20 years of teaching. But there's a problem." He pulled out another essay, Jessica's essay. As I read it, my blood turned to ice. She had stolen my story. Not just the basic themes, but specific details, personal anecdotes, even particular phrases I'd crafted. She'd taken my grandmother's struggles and rewritten them as her own mother's fictional charity work. She'd appropriated my pain and transformed it into her own tale of privileged enlightenment. "The similarities are striking," Mr. Davidson said carefully. "The scholarship committee will need to investigate." I knew how that investigation would go. Jessica's word against mine. The Morrison family's influence against the scholarship girl's accusations. Guess who they'd believe? I was right. 3 days later, I was called to the principal's office. Dr. Williams sat behind his massive desk with Jessica and her parents flanked on either side. "Emma," Dr. Williams began, "serious allegations have been made regarding academic dishonesty." "What allegations?" I asked, though I already knew. Mrs. Morrison, dripping with fake sympathy, spoke up. "We understand this must be difficult for you, dear. The pressure to succeed, the financial strain, it can make people do desperate things. Jessica's essay contained several passages that were remarkably similar to yours," Dr. Williams continued. "However, Jessica submitted her draft to her private tutor 2 weeks before your submission date." The private tutor. Of course. Money could buy timestamps, witnesses, whatever narrative they needed. "This is ridiculous," I protested. "She stole my essay. Check my computer, my drafts, my research notes." "We did," Dr. Williams replied. "Unfortunately, those can be easily fabricated after the fact." I realized then that the game was rigged from the beginning. They had all the power, all the resources, all the credibility. I was just the scholarship girl who'd finally overreached. Given the seriousness of this academic misconduct, Dr. Williams continued, "We have no choice but to suspend you for the remainder of the semester. Your scholarship is hereby revoked." The words hit me like physical blows. Everything I'd worked for, everything my grandmother had sacrificed for, was being taken away based on a lie. The Morrison family has graciously agreed not to pursue criminal charges for theft of intellectual property, Mrs. Morrison added, as if she were doing me a favor. Jessica, meanwhile, sat silently with a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She'd won completely. I gathered my belongings from my locker as word spread through the school. Students who'd never spoken to me before felt bold enough to make comments as I passed. "Scholarship trash finally got caught." I always knew she was a cheater. At least now she can stop pretending to belong here. My grandmother was waiting for me when I got home, having been called by the school. She took one look at my face and wrapped me in her arms without saying a word. They didn't just take away my scholarship, Grandma, I told her through tears. They took away my story. They stole who I am. My grandmother, all 4 feet 10 inches of her, looked at me with steel in her eyes. Emma, listen to me. They can take away your scholarship, your place at that school, even your college dreams, but they cannot take away your mind. They cannot take away your strength, and they cannot take away the truth. She was right, but it didn't make the next few months any easier. I finished my senior year at public school, working nights to help pay bills while maintaining my grades. Most colleges had already made their decisions by the time I applied, and without the Riverside Academy prestige or the Morrison Scholarship, my options were limited. I ended up at Portland State University on a partial scholarship, working multiple jobs to cover the rest. It wasn't Harvard or Stanford like I'd dreamed, but it was education, and education was power. During my freshman year, I discovered something that changed everything: law. Professor Martinez's constitutional law class opened my eyes to a world where truth mattered, where evidence was king, where clever arguments could topple even the most established powers. I devoured every case study, every precedent, every legal strategy I could find. But more importantly, I learned about corporate law, securities regulation, and white-collar crime. I learned about the kinds of financial misconduct that wealthy families often engaged in, believing themselves untouchable. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and political science. My LSAT scores were in the 99th percentile. Harvard Law School didn't just accept me, they offered me a full scholarship. At Harvard, I wasn't the poor girl anymore. I was just another brilliant student among many. The playing field was level, and I excelled. I made law review, interned at top firms, and graduated in the top 5% of my class. But I never forgot where I came from or what had been done to me. During my 3rd year, I wrote my thesis on financial fraud in private educational institutions. The research was fascinating, particularly the ways wealthy families manipulated charitable donations and scholarship funds for tax benefits while maintaining control over who received aid. I also learned some interesting things about Morrison Properties and their business practices. Public records are wonderful things when you know how to read them. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, watching the city skyline through my floor-to-ceiling windows. The conversation had stirred up feelings I thought I'd long since processed and moved past. Was Jessica's apology genuine? It seemed to be. Did it change anything about what had happened? Not really, but perhaps that wasn't the point. I picked up my phone and called my grandmother, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever. "Grandma, it's Emma." "Hello, my dear. You sound thoughtful. What's on your mind?" I told her about Jessica's visit, about the apology, about the complicated emotions it had stirred up. "And how do you feel about it?" she asked when I finished. "I'm not sure. Part of me is glad she finally understands what she did. Part of me thinks it's too little, too late, and part of me wonders if I should feel more satisfied? Vindicated?" My grandmother was quiet for a moment. "Emma, let me tell you something I learned many years ago. Revenge is like holding a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned." "But I didn't seek revenge, Grandma. I just succeeded despite what they did." "Exactly. And that's why you're free now in a way that Jessica never was. She's been carrying the weight of her actions all these years. You let them go and built something beautiful instead. So what do I do now?" "Whatever feels right to you. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. You don't forgive to let them off the hook. You forgive to free yourself from carrying their actions around with you." That night, I drafted an email to Jessica. "Jessica, thank you for coming to see me today. Your apology was unexpected but appreciated. I can see that it took courage to acknowledge your past actions so honestly. I want you to know that I forgave you years ago, not because you deserved it, but because carrying anger was holding me back from becoming who I needed to be. Your actions in high school were cruel and damaging, but they also taught me resilience and showed me what kind of person I never wanted to become. I'm glad to hear you're working to break the cycle with your daughter. That's probably the most meaningful form of repentance you could offer. I wish you and your family well." Emma. I read it several times before hitting send. It felt right, honest but not cruel, firm but not vindictive. 2 years later, I received another unexpected contact. This time it was a LinkedIn message from Dr. Williams. Dear Miss Chen, I hope this message finds you well. I am reaching out because Riverside Academy is undergoing a comprehensive review of our policies and procedures, particularly around academic misconduct allegations and student support systems. Your case from years ago has been cited multiple times as an example of how our institution failed to live up to its stated values. I would very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about your experience and how we might improve our practices going forward. I understand if you have no interest in helping the institution that treated you so poorly, but I hope you might consider it for the sake of future students who deserve better than what you received. Respectfully, Dr. Robert Williams. I stared at the message for a long time. The irony was remarkable. The man who had expelled me was now asking for my help in reforming the very system that had failed me. But as I thought about it, I realized this was an opportunity to create real change, to ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to other students. I agreed to meet with Dr. Williams and the school's reform committee. The conversation was difficult but productive. I laid out in detail how the investigation into my alleged plagiarism had been conducted, what evidence had been ignored, and how financial considerations had influenced academic decisions. The fundamental problem, I told the committee, wasn't just that you got my case wrong. It was that you never had proper procedures in place to handle such cases fairly. You allowed wealth and influence to override evidence and due process. The meeting led to my joining an advisory board tasked with overhauling Riverside's academic integrity policies. It was strange being back in those halls as an adult, as someone with power rather than a vulnerable student. During one of our board meetings, I learned something that surprised me. Jessica's daughter, Sarah, was now a student at Riverside. According to her teachers, she was brilliant but struggling socially, caught between her family's expectations and her own emerging sense of justice. She's been asking hard questions about privilege and fairness, one teacher reported. Sometimes it creates tension with other students from similar backgrounds. I smiled at that. Perhaps Jessica was succeeding in raising a daughter who would be better than she had been. As my involvement with Riverside continued, I occasionally saw Sarah in the hallways. She had her mother's beauty, but something else in her eyes. A thoughtfulness, a questioning nature that Jessica had lacked at that age. One day, she approached me after a board meeting. "Excuse me, Miss Chen? I'm Sarah Thompson. I think you know my mother." "I do. Hello, Sarah. How are you finding Riverside?" She considered the question seriously. "It's complicated. There's a lot of pressure to fit in, to not rock the boat. But my mom has been telling me about what she did when she was here, about how she treated you and others. She said I should try to be better." What do you think about that? I think she's right. I think this place can bring out the worst in people if they let it. But maybe it doesn't have to. Over the next year, I watched Sarah become a leader among her classmates, not through social manipulation like her mother had, but through genuine advocacy for fairness and inclusion. She started a scholarship mentorship program pairing students from different economic backgrounds. She spoke out against bullying and exclusion. She was becoming exactly the kind of person Jessica had hoped she would be. The changes at Riverside were slow but real. New policies ensured that academic misconduct allegations would be investigated by neutral parties. Financial aid students received additional support and protection. The school culture began to shift, prioritizing character and achievement over social status and wealth. It wasn't perfect. Institutional change never is, but it was progress. 5 years after Jessica's visit to my office, I received a graduation invitation. Sarah was valedictorian, and she wanted me to attend the ceremony. I sat in the audience, watching this remarkable young woman deliver a speech about integrity, compassion, and the responsibility that comes with privilege. She spoke about learning from past mistakes, her family's mistakes, and using education to build a more just world. After the ceremony, Sarah found me in the crowd. "Thank you for coming," she said. "And thank you for helping make this school better." You're the one making it better, I replied. I just helped with some policy changes. My mom wanted me to give you this, she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a simple note from Jessica. Emma, watching Sarah become the person she is has been the greatest joy of my life. I know that her character was shaped partly by the conversations we had about you, about integrity, about treating others with dignity, regardless of their circumstances. I can never undo what I did to you, but perhaps helping raise a daughter who will never treat anyone the way I treated you is a form of redemption. Thank you for your grace, your forgiveness, and your example. With deep respect and gratitude, Jessica. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on the long, winding path that had brought me to this moment. The scared, humiliated girl who had been expelled from Riverside 15 years ago could never have imagined this outcome. The revenge I had once craved had transformed into something much more meaningful. The power to create positive change, to break cycles of cruelty, to mentor the next generation towards something better. My phone buzzed with a text from my grandmother. How was the graduation, dear? I smiled as I typed back. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. The next week, I received a call that would change my life again. The mayor of Portland was offering me a position as chief legal counsel for the city, with a focus on educational equity and institutional reform. We need someone who understands how systems can fail students, the mayor explained. Someone who's been on both sides of privilege and can help us build something better. I thought about the offer for several days. Returning to Portland permanently would mean leaving my successful New York practice, starting over in a different arena, but it would also mean the opportunity to create systemic change on a much larger scale. In the end, the decision was easy. I had proven myself in the corporate world. Now it was time to use that success to help others who faced the challenges I had overcome. 6 months later, I was back in Portland, living in a house not far from the apartment where my grandmother had raised me. She was thrilled to have me nearby again, though she teased me about coming home after conquering the world. My work with the city was challenging but rewarding. We reformed scholarship programs, created new protections for students from low-income families, and established accountability measures for private schools that received public benefits. The work brought me into contact with many of the same families and institutions that had shaped my youth, but now I engaged with them from a position of strength and authority rather than vulnerability. One day, while reviewing applications for a new educational equity initiative, I saw a familiar name. Morrison Properties was applying for a city contract to build affordable housing near several schools. The application would normally go through standard review processes, but given my history with the family, I recused myself from any involvement in the decision. I'd learned that true justice isn't about personal vendettas. It's about fair processes and equal treatment under the law. The contract was ultimately awarded to Morrison Properties based on their competitive bid and strong proposal. Business was business, and the past was past. A year into my tenure with the city, I was invited to speak at Riverside Academy's annual awards ceremony. The invitation came from Sarah Thompson, now a freshman at Stanford and serving on Riverside's Young Alumni Board. "We want you to present the new Academic Integrity Award," she explained. It seems fitting. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. I would be returning to the school that had expelled me for academic dishonesty to present an award celebrating academic integrity. Standing at the podium in the same auditorium where I had once been humiliated, I looked out at an audience that included many familiar faces, former classmates, teachers, administrators, and parents who remembered the scandal from years past. Education, I began, is supposed to be the great equalizer, the pathway through which talent and hard work can overcome circumstance and background. But sometimes our educational institutions fall short of that ideal. Sometimes they perpetuate inequality rather than addressing it. I spoke about second chances, about the importance of fair processes, about the responsibility we all have to ensure that every student has the opportunity to reach their potential, regardless of their economic status or social connections. The student receiving tonight's Academic Integrity Award exemplifies these values, I continued. Maria Rodriguez, a junior here at Riverside, not only maintains the highest academic standards for herself, but has created a peer tutoring program that provides free academic support to students who might not otherwise be able to afford it. As I presented the award to Maria, a scholarship student who reminded me so much of my younger self, I felt a profound sense of completion. The circle had closed, but in a way I never could have imagined. After the ceremony, Dr. Williams approached me. "Thank you for doing this, Emma," he said quietly. "I know it couldn't have been easy given our history." "Actually," I replied, "it was exactly what I needed to do." "I want you to know," he continued, "that your case changed how I approach my job. I've spent the last several years studying educational equity and institutional bias. I should have been better, should have done better by you." "We all should have been better," I agreed. "But we learned, and we're trying to do better now. That's what matters." As I left Riverside that night, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd finally set down a burden I'd been carrying for too long. My grandmother was waiting up for me when I got home, despite the late hour. "How was it, dear?" she asked, offering me a cup of tea. "It was perfect, Grandma. Really perfect." "And how do you feel?" I thought about her question carefully. "How did I feel?" "Free," I said finally. For the first time in my life, completely free. 2 years later, I was appointed to the State Board of Education, the youngest person ever to hold the position. My mandate was clear: reform educational policies to ensure equity and opportunity for all students, regardless of background. It was challenging work, often frustrating, sometimes heartbreaking, but it was also the most meaningful thing I'd ever done. One evening, as I was working late in my office reviewing proposed changes to state scholarship programs, my assistant knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "She says she's an old friend." I looked up to see a young woman in her early 20s, professionally dressed but with an uncertain expression. "Miss Chen? I'm Sarah Thompson. We met at my graduation from Riverside." "Of course. Sarah, please come in. How are you? How's Stanford?" "Stanford is wonderful, thank you. I'm majoring in education policy, actually, partly inspired by the work you've been doing." She sat down across from my desk, clutching a folder in her hands. "I'm here because I want to ask you something," she continued. "I'm starting my senior thesis next year, and I'd like to write about educational equity and the long-term impacts of institutional bias on student outcomes." "That sounds like important research," I said. "I was hoping you might be willing to be interviewed for the project, about your experiences, about the changes you've helped implement, about what still needs to be done." I studied her face, seeing so much of Jessica's beauty but none of her mother's calculating coldness. This was a young woman driven by genuine passion for justice, not social advancement. "I'd be honored to participate," I said. "But are you sure you want to take on such a personal topic? Your mother's actions will inevitably be part of the story." Sarah nodded seriously. "My mom and I have talked about it extensively. She thinks it's important that the truth be told, that her mistakes be part of the historical record if it can help prevent similar injustices." "And what do you hope to accomplish with this research?" "I want to document how bias operates in educational settings, how it affects students from marginalized backgrounds, and what systemic changes are most effective in addressing it. But I also want to show that individuals can overcome institutional failures and use their success to create positive change." Over the following months, Sarah and I met regularly for interviews. She was a thoughtful researcher, asking probing questions about my experiences while maintaining appropriate academic distance from the personal elements of the story. Her thesis, completed the following spring, was titled "From Exclusion to Advocacy: How Educational Trauma Can Drive Institutional Reform." It won several awards and was later published in a peer-reviewed journal. But more importantly, it served as a roadmap for other institutions seeking to address their own histories of bias and exclusion. Sarah went on to law school after graduation, following a path not unlike my own. She specialized in education law and civil rights, dedicating her career to the same issues that had shaped both our families' stories. Jessica and I never became friends exactly, but we developed a mutual respect based on our shared commitment to raising the next generation to be better than we had been. She occasionally attended public events where I was speaking, always sitting quietly in the back, never seeking attention or recognition. After one such event, a conference on educational equity that I was keynoting, she approached me during the reception. "I wanted you to know," she said quietly, "that Sarah talks about you often. You've become a role model for her, someone who shows her what's possible when you combine intelligence with integrity." "She's a remarkable young woman," I replied. "You should be proud of the mother you've become." "I'm trying to be worthy of the daughter I raised," she said with a sad smile. "It's not easy, living up to your child's expectations when you know how far short you fell in your own youth. We all have the capacity to grow, Jessica. What matters is that you're trying." As the years passed, my work with the State Board of Education expanded nationally. I was invited to consult with school districts across the country, helping them develop policies and practices that promoted equity and inclusion. I never forgot where I came from, never lost sight of the scared teenager who had been failed by the very institutions meant to nurture her potential. Every policy I helped develop, every program I designed, every speech I gave was informed by that experience. My grandmother lived to see my appointment to the Federal Department of Education as Deputy Secretary, a position that gave me the platform to influence educational policy on a national scale. She passed away peacefully in her sleep two weeks after my confirmation, having seen her granddaughter rise from scholarship student to national leader. At her funeral, I delivered a eulogy that paid tribute not just to her love and sacrifice, but to her wisdom in teaching me that success wasn't about proving others wrong, it was about proving yourself right. "My grandmother taught me," I said to the gathered crowd, "that the best revenge against injustice isn't causing pain to those who wronged you. It's building a world where such injustices can't happen to others." Among the mourners were faces from throughout my life's journey. Colleagues from New York, Portland City officials, Riverside Academy board members, and former classmates who had become friends over the years. Sarah Thompson, now a practicing civil rights attorney, served as one of the pallbearers. Jessica sat quietly in the back, offering a respectful nod when our eyes met. After the service, as I was accepting condolences, Dr. Williams approached with his wife. "Emma," he said softly, "your grandmother would be so proud of everything you've accomplished." "She was proud," I replied. "She got to see it all." "I want you to know," he continued, "that the changes you helped us implement at Riverside have become a model for schools across the state. We've prevented countless injustices because of your willingness to help us do better." "That's what she would have wanted," I said, looking toward my grandmother's casket. "Justice, not revenge. Progress, not punishment." Years later, as I prepared for retirement from government service, I reflected on the long journey from that humiliated teenager to the position I held. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led exactly where it needed to go. My final act as Deputy Secretary was to establish the Chen Educational Equity Initiative, a program providing resources and support to students from underrepresented backgrounds pursuing higher education. The program was funded through a combination of federal resources and private donations, including a substantial contribution from the Thompson Family Foundation, Sarah's organization, dedicated to educational justice. On the day of my retirement ceremony, held in the same Portland hotel where Jessica's wedding reception had taken place decades earlier, I was surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by the work we'd done together. The keynote speaker was Dr. Sarah Thompson, now a respected attorney and education advocate who spoke about the power of transforming personal pain into public good. "Emma Chen taught us," Sarah said to the audience, "that the highest form of success isn't personal advancement. It's using your platform to lift others up." As she spoke, I saw Jessica in the audience, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter honor the woman she had once tried to destroy. After the ceremony, Jessica approached me one final time. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for forgiving me, for helping Sarah become who she is, for showing us all what grace and strength look like." "Thank you," I replied, "for raising a daughter who will carry this work forward long after we're gone." We embraced briefly, two women who had been enemies in youth but had found their way to mutual respect through the shared project of building something better. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I stood alone for a moment in the hotel ballroom, remembering another night in this same space when a scared young woman had faced her tormentors and chosen justice over revenge. That young woman could never have imagined the journey that lay ahead, the challenges she would face, the victories she would win, or the lives she would touch. She could never have foreseen that her greatest triumph would come not from defeating her enemies, but from transforming them into allies in the fight for something greater than any individual story. The invitation to that long-ago reunion still sat framed in my home office, next to photos documenting a career dedicated to ensuring that no other student would face what I had faced. Next to it was a more recent photo. Sarah Thompson and a group of scholarship students she was mentoring, all of them bright-eyed and full of potential, all of them benefiting from systems that had been reformed to protect rather than punish. As I finally left the hotel that night, I thought about my grandmother's words from so many years ago. They can take away your scholarship, your place at that school, even your college dreams, but they cannot take away your mind. They cannot take away your strength, and they cannot take away the truth. She had been right about all of it. They couldn't take away what truly mattered. And in the end, what truly mattered wasn't revenge or vindication or even justice in the traditional sense. What mattered was the truth. That every student deserves the chance to reach their potential, that institutions have the power to nurture or destroy dreams, and that those who have been lifted up have the responsibility to reach back and lift others. The scholarship girl who had been rejected and humiliated had indeed gotten her revenge, not through destruction or humiliation in return, but through construction, building a legacy that would outlast any individual story of triumph or failure. As I drove home through the Portland streets where my journey had begun, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes not from defeating enemies, but from transforming the battlefield itself into something better. Something worthy of the dreams we dare to dream for ourselves and for each other. That, perhaps, is the truest revenge of all. Graduation. I was courted by every major law firm in the country. I chose Peterson & Associates, a boutique firm specializing in corporate investigations and white-collar defense. They were smaller than the big names, but their reputation for thoroughness and discretion was unmatched. I started as an associate, but my background in finance and my relentless work ethic set me apart. I had a particular talent for uncovering financial irregularities that others missed. Within 3 years, I was made junior partner, the youngest in the firm's history, and then the reunion invitation arrived. I stared at that elegant cardstock for a long time, remembering our eyes met across the room and I saw the moment of recognition. Her confident smile faltered slightly before she recovered her composure. I made my way over slowly, stopping to chat with various classmates along the way. The conversations were interesting studies in social dynamics. Emma? Emma Chen? Oh my God, you look amazing! This from Madison Pierce, who'd been part of Jessica's inner circle and had participated enthusiastically in my humiliation. Thank you, Madison. You look well, too. I kept my tone polite but cool. What are you doing now? Are you still in Portland? I'm a partner at Peterson & Associates in New York, I replied, watching her expression change as she processed this information. Wait, the law firm? The one that was in the news for that huge corporate investigation? The same. Madison's demeanor shifted noticeably. Suddenly, I was someone worth knowing again. Similar conversations played out as I made my way around the room. Former classmates who'd treated me with disdain now wanted to reminisce about our friendship. Teachers who'd ignored my struggles now remembered me as one of their most promising students. Finally, I reached Jessica's group. Well, she said with her trademark smile, though I could see the calculation behind her eyes. If it isn't Emma Chen, you certainly clean up well. Hello, Jessica. You look lovely as always. Thank you, sweetie. I have to say, I'm surprised to see you here. I thought you'd moved away after your troubles senior year. The casual cruelty was still there, delivered with a smile and a tone that suggested concern rather than malice. Some things never changed. Oh, I did move away, I replied pleasantly. Harvard Law School, then New York. But Portland will always be home. I saw the flicker of surprise in her eyes before she covered it. Harvard? That's wonderful, darling. I always knew you were smart, even if you sometimes made poor choices about which work was actually yours. The group around us shifted uncomfortably. Even by Jessica's standards, the comment was cutting. Speaking of work, I continued as if she hadn't spoken, I should mention that I've been following Morrison Properties in the news lately. Quite interesting developments in the investigation. Now I had her full attention. The blood drained from her face, though she tried to maintain her composure. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, she said carefully. Really? The federal investigation into your father's charitable tax deductions? The questions about whether the Morrison Academic Excellence Award was properly administered? I would have thought the family would be keeping close track of such matters. The truth was, I'd been the one to tip off the IRS about irregularities in the Morrison Foundation's tax filings. Not out of spite, exactly, but because financial fraud should have consequences regardless of who commits it. Jessica's husband, whom I now recognized as Bradley Thompson from our graduating class, stepped closer to his wife protectively. I don't think this is appropriate, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. You're absolutely right, Bradley, I agreed. Reunion isn't the place for business discussions. I was simply making conversation about current events. I turned back to Jessica with my most innocent smile. Do you remember me, Jessica? The question caught her off guard. For a moment, she looked uncertain. Of course I remember you, Emma. How could I forget? I replied, echoing her words from my question, but with a completely different meaning. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mr. Davidson, our former AP English teacher. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. Emma Chen, he exclaimed warmly. I heard you were here. I have to tell you, I followed your career through the Harvard Alumni magazine. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. Thank you, Mr. Davidson. That means a lot coming from you. You know, he continued, oblivious to the tension in our group, I still have that essay you wrote senior year, the one about overcoming adversity. It was the most powerful piece of student writing I've ever encountered. I use it sometimes as an example for current students, naturally with identifying details removed. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica's face went through several color changes before settling on a sickly pale. That's very kind of you, I replied calmly. I'm glad it's proven useful. Mr. Davidson beamed and moved on to greet other former students, leaving our group in uncomfortable silence. Well, Bradley said eventually, I think I need another drink. He walked away quickly, followed by most of Jessica's entourage. Only Jessica and I remained facing each other. You've certainly made something of yourself, she said quietly, the fake sweetness finally dropping from her voice. I have, I agreed, despite certain people's best efforts to prevent it. Emma, about what happened senior year? What about it, Jessica? I interrupted. You stole my work, destroyed my scholarship, and had me expelled based on lies. Did you think I'd forgotten? It wasn't personal, she said, which was possibly the most ridiculous thing she could have said. It wasn't personal? I repeated. You deliberately humiliated me at the winter formal. You called me scholarship trash in front of the entire school. You stole my personal story and claimed it as your own. How was any of that not personal? Jessica looked around nervously, checking if anyone was listening. Look, we were kids, stupid kids who did stupid things. Can't we just move past it? Move past it? I mused. Interesting choice of words. Tell me, Jessica, how much did your family make in fraudulent tax deductions from that scholarship fund over the years? Her eyes widened. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? The Morrison Foundation claimed charitable deductions for scholarship funds that were never properly distributed. The money went to students who were already receiving full scholarships from other sources, creating double benefits, while the foundation kept the tax advantages. It's really quite clever, if highly illegal. You can't prove any of that, she said, but her voice was shaking. Actually, I can. I spent considerable time researching your family's business practices for a law review article I'm publishing next month. Charitable fraud in private educational institutions, a case study. I think you'd find it fascinating reading. The truth was more complicated than I was letting on. While I had discovered irregularities in the Morrison Foundation's filings, I hadn't yet found smoking gun evidence of deliberate fraud. But Jessica didn't need to know that. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "Want?" I laughed. "Jessica, I don't want anything from you. I have everything I need: a successful career, financial security, the respect of my peers. I built all of that myself without stealing from anyone else." "Then why are you here? Why are you doing this?" I considered the question seriously. Why was I here? What was I hoping to accomplish? "I'm here," I said finally, "because I wanted you to see who I became despite what you did to me. I wanted you to understand that your cruelty didn't destroy me. It made me stronger. And I wanted you to know that actions have consequences, even if they take years to materialize." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm simply stating facts. Your family's foundation is under federal investigation. The IRS takes tax fraud very seriously, as does the Department of Justice. I imagine it's a very stressful time for everyone involved." Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. "You vindictive bitch," she hissed. "You ruined your own life with your cheating, and now you want to destroy mine too." "I didn't cheat, Jessica, and we both know it. You stole my work because you couldn't bear the thought of the scholarship girl winning something that was meant to be yours. But here's what you never understood. I didn't need your family's corrupt scholarship to succeed. I just needed the truth to eventually come out." "The truth?" She laughed bitterly. "What truth? That you were jealous of everything I had? That you couldn't stand being the poor girl at the rich kid's school?" "The truth," I replied calmly, "is that you were threatened by someone who achieved more with nothing than you ever could with everything handed to you. That's why you had to destroy me. Because deep down, you knew I was better than you." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Jessica's face flushed with anger, but she couldn't deny what I'd said because we both knew it was true. "This isn't over," she said finally. "Yes, it is," I replied. "It's been over for years. I've moved on to bigger and better things. You're the one still stuck in high school, still playing the same petty games." I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back. "Oh, and Jessica? You might want to get a good lawyer, one who specializes in federal tax cases. I hear they can be quite complex." I walked away without looking back, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't expected. Not because I'd hurt her, though I couldn't deny there was some gratification in that, but because I'd finally said everything I'd wanted to say for 5 years. The rest of the reunion passed in a blur of conversations with classmates who suddenly remembered our friendship and teachers who claimed to have always believed in my potential. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I prepared to leave, I was approached by someone I hadn't expected to see, Dr. Williams, our former principal. "Emma," he said with what appeared to be genuine warmth, "I'm so glad you came tonight. I've been following your career, and I have to say I'm incredibly proud of what you've achieved. The audacity was breathtaking. This was the man who'd expelled me based on fabricated evidence, we followed proper procedures. You followed the path of least resistance. It was easier to sacrifice one scholarship student than to anger a major donor family. Don't pretend it was about evidence or procedures. It was about money and power, and we both know it." Dr. Williams looked around nervously, noticing that our conversation was drawing attention. "Perhaps this isn't the best place for this discussion," he said quietly. "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "This isn't the place for a discussion about institutional corruption and administrative cowardice. That's what courtrooms are for." I saw him pale. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Riverside Academy's handling of academic misconduct allegations could make for an interesting case study, particularly when viewed alongside the broader patterns of favoritism toward donor families." "Emma, please. Relax, Dr. Williams. I have better things to do than sue my old high school, but I want you to understand something. What you did to me was wrong. It was cowardly, it was unjust, and it nearly destroyed my future. The fact that I succeeded anyway doesn't absolve you of responsibility." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "And if you ever treat another student the way you treated me, I'll make sure the entire education community knows exactly what kind of administrator you really are." I walked away, leaving him standing speechless in the middle of the gymnasium. Outside, the Portland air was crisp and clean. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking back at the school that had once seemed so important, so intimidating. Now it just looked small. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. "How did it go?" I typed back, "Better than expected. Flying back tomorrow as planned." As I drove through the streets of my childhood, I reflected on the evening. Had I gotten the revenge I'd wanted? Had justice been served? In some ways, yes. Jessica had been forced to confront the consequences of her actions. Dr. Williams had been confronted with his cowardice. The investigation into Morrison Properties was real and ongoing, though its outcome remained uncertain. But more importantly, I'd proven something to myself. I'd returned not as the broken, humiliated girl who'd left 5 years ago, but as a successful woman who'd built her own life on her own terms. That transformation was its own form of justice. The next morning, as my plane lifted off from Portland International Airport, I looked down at the city that had shaped me. In a few hours, I'd be back in New York, back to my real life, my chosen life. My phone rang as we reached cruising altitude. It was my grandmother. "How was the reunion, my dear?" "Educational," I replied. "Very educational." "Did you get what you went there for?" I thought about her question. What had I gone there for? Revenge? Vindication? Closure? "I think so, Grandma. I think I finally understand that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that their opinions no longer matter." "Very wise," she said with pride in her voice. "Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." "I hope so. I'm finally proud of her too." 3 months later, I was in my office reviewing briefs when my assistant brought in the morning papers. The headline of the Portland Business Journal made me smile. "Morrison Properties settles federal tax case for $2.3 million." The article detailed how Robert Morrison had agreed to pay substantial penalties and back taxes to resolve allegations of improper charitable deductions through the Morrison Foundation. While he admitted no wrongdoing, the foundation would be disbanded and its remaining assets donated to legitimate scholarship programs. I set the paper aside and returned to my work. Justice had been served, but not in the way I'd originally imagined. The law had run its course, as it should. My role had been to provide information to the proper authorities, nothing more. That evening, I received an unexpected email. "Dear Emma, I heard about your success from several classmates after the reunion. I wanted to reach out to congratulate you and to apologize for my behavior in high school. I realize now that I was caught up in a toxic social dynamic and failed to stand up for what was right. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive an old friend who should have been better. I'm working as a teacher now in underprivileged schools, partly inspired by watching how cruel we were to you and wanting to do better. I hope that makes some small difference. Congratulations on everything you've achieved. You deserve better from all of us. Sincerely, Madison Pierce." I stared at the email for a long time. Of all the people I'd expected to hear from, Madison wasn't one of them. Her apology seemed genuine, though it came years too late to matter much. "Still," I replied, "Dear Madison, thank you for your email and your apology. I appreciate you taking the time to reach out. You're right that high school brought out the worst in many people. I'm glad to hear you're working to make a positive difference now. That's what matters. I hope you find fulfillment in your teaching career. Best regards, Emma." It was a polite response, nothing more. Some wounds heal, but they always leave scars. A year after the reunion, I made partner at Peterson & Associates, the youngest person ever to achieve that level at the firm. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile on me titled "The Scholarship Girl Who Conquered Corporate Law." I kept a copy of that article framed in my office, not out of vanity, but as a reminder. Next to it was a photo of my grandmother and me at my Harvard graduation, both of us beaming with pride. Sometimes former classmates would reach out through social media or professional networks, usually when they needed legal help or had heard about my success. I was always polite but professional. The past was past. Jessica never contacted me directly, though I heard through mutual connections that her marriage to Bradley had ended in an expensive divorce. Apparently, the stress of her father's legal troubles had taken a toll on the relationship. She'd moved to California and was working in her mother's interior design business. I felt no satisfaction in her misfortunes. My life had moved far beyond the need for such petty vindication. 5 years after the reunion, I opened my own firm specializing in corporate compliance and white-collar defense. Chen and Associates grew quickly, gaining a reputation for thorough investigations and ethical practices. We represented whistleblowers as often as we defended corporations, always on the side of truth and justice. One day, my assistant announced that I had a visitor who refused to give her name, but claimed to be from my high school. I was surprised when Jessica Morrison Thompson walked into my office. She looked older, obviously, and there was a wariness in her bearing that hadn't been there at the reunion. She was still beautiful, but it was a more subdued beauty, tinged with sadness and regret. "Hello, Emma," she said quietly. "Thank you for seeing me." "I have to admit, I'm curious about what brings you here," I replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. Jessica sat down carefully, clutching a small purse in her lap. "I wanted to apologize," she said simply. "For everything. For high school, for what I did to you, for the person I was." I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but found only what appeared to be genuine remorse. "What changed?" I asked. "Therapy," she said with a bitter laugh. "Lots of therapy after my divorce. It turns out that building your entire identity around being superior to other people isn't a recipe for happiness or healthy relationships." She looked around my office, taking in the diplomas, the elegant furnishings that spoke of genuine success rather than inherited privilege. "I've been following your career," she continued. "Your success, your reputation, the good work your firm does. And I realized something. You became everything I pretended to be. You have real achievements, real respect, real impact on the world, while I've been coasting on my family name and my appearance, accomplishing nothing of substance." "Jessica, please let me finish," she interrupted. "I need to say this. What I did to you in high school was unforgivable. I stole your work, destroyed your scholarship, and nearly ruined your future because I couldn't stand the idea that someone like you might be better than someone like me. I was threatened by your intelligence, your integrity, your strength, so I used the only weapons I had: money and social status." Tears were running down her cheeks now, and I could see that this admission was costing her something. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I don't deserve it. I'm just asking that you know I'm truly sorry, and that seeing what you've accomplished despite what I did to you has been both inspiring and devastating. You deserved so much better from all of us." I sat in silence for a moment, processing her words. This wasn't the reunion, where public humiliation had been part of the game. This was private, personal, and seemingly genuine. "Why now?" I asked finally. "Why come here and tell me this?" Jessica wiped her eyes with a tissue. "Because I have a daughter now. She's in middle school, and she's brilliant and kind and everything I should have been. But I watch her sometimes, and I see shadows of who I was. The entitlement, the casual cruelty toward kids who are different, and I realized I couldn't let her become me without at least trying to make amends for what I did." That surprised me. Jessica is a mother, trying to break cycles of behavior she'd inherited and perpetuated. "How is she doing?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Better now. We've had some difficult conversations about privilege and kindness, and the difference between being special and being entitled. She's resistant sometimes, but she's learning. I just hope it's not too late to help her become a better person than I was." We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Finally, Jessica stood to leave. "Thank you for listening," she said. "I know this doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know that I understand now what I did and how wrong it was." She paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Emma, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. You deserved every bit of success you've achieved." After,